The first student who will be talking to us is Hanne Marit Henriksen. She has studied in the Department of Interdisciplinary Cultural Study, and her talk is entitled "A Change in the Air," and will be about conference travel amongst academics, which of course is a very hot topic these days at our university and many other universities. So Hanne Marit, please, it's your turn.
Thank you. So my name is Hanne Henriksen. I have a master's in Science and Technology Studies, often referred to as STS, and I turned in my master thesis in June. For those of you who are not familiar with STS, I can tell you that we focus on how science and technologies are constructed or produced. By investigating the connections between humans and technologies, knowledge, negotiations, laws, actions, and so on, our goal is to uncover how things have become what they are. And in my master thesis, I have looked into the unsustainable work travel practices among academics. But before I let you in on my findings, I'm going to give you a little insight in why I chose this topic. So, over the past years, there has been an increased focus on air travels and its damaging effect on the climate. From 1990 till 2010, the emissions from air traffic went up 70%, and the air traffic is expected to continue rising. If you want to live a sustainable life, cutting down on your air travels is one of the most effective things you can do. As this figure shows, the total emissions that are saved by your recycling efforts and vegetarian diet over an entire year are less than the amount for just one transatlantic flight. And air traffic is one of the most difficult sectors to decarbonize. The technology of electrical airplanes are still far ahead of time. So to reduce emissions from air traffic, the number of air travels must be reduced. So this is a heading from an article in Adresseavisa last year. NTNU had just released their carbon footprint account, and it turned out that 29% of NTNU's total carbon emissions were due to traveling, mainly from air travels. My first thought was, wow, that's a lot. And secondly, I was surprised that academics, a group of people that presumably are very knowledgeable about the climate crisis, still fly so much. So I started to do a little investigation. And what I found was that this was not unique for NTNU. All over the world, academics seem to be hypermobile, getting on an airplane more and more often. But I also found that a lot of academics are protesting against this unsustainable work travel practice, and that several universities want to reduce the amount of air travel, including NTNU. But despite ambitious goals and increased focus, the number of flights have just kept rising. So I decided to do a study on the topic. And here are my research questions. How and why have traveling and air travels become such an important part of the academic work life? How has the increased focus on sustainability affected the travel practices? And why is it so hard to reduce the amount of air travel? How can we pursue a more sustainable work travel practice among academics? And before I move on, I guess this is what you're all thinking right now. And yes, COVID-19 has put a temporary stop to the excessive traveling, and practices have changed dramatically over the past 5 to 6 months. And I must admit, when COVID-19 hit, approximately 3 months after I had gathered my data, I felt a bit torn because on the one hand, the reduction in air travel was great for the environment. But on the other hand, I was now writing about something that had stopped being a problem. But then I realized my findings are actually quite important, and I will let you in on why a little bit later. So the findings that I am presenting to you now are based on 8 in-depth interviews with professors and researchers at NTNU. In addition, I have analyzed relevant documents on Norwegian research policy and organizational documents from NTNU. So I started by looking into why academics travel so much, and quickly internationalization came up as a key element. When Norway became a fully fledged member of EU's research programs, it led to an increased focus on internationalization. To meet this focus, the Norwegian Research Council made a strategy, and one of the measures was to put international activities as a criterion to be evaluated for funding. And at the same time, they defined internationalization as participating in international projects and publishing, and mobility. Internationalization is a focus area in NTNU's strategy and plans. And internationalization is important because research activity at NTNU is increasingly funded by international sources and obtained in collaboration with researchers from other countries. These types of collaborations are also important for NTNU's reputation. But NTNU has not only put mobility as a measure, they have actually put mobility as a goal itself. And we can all agree that internationalization provides great value. But Norwegian research policy and NTNU have made internationalization equal to mobility. And with that, they have established a clear direction for the work travel culture among the scientific staff. So when I moved on to talk to professors and researchers, they let me in on how they experience that conferences and physical meetings are important to the knowledge production. And first of all, building a network in academia is really important. To have someone to collaborate with is essential to get funding. So getting to know other researchers is both about making sure that you have skilled people to invite into your own projects, but also to make sure that you are invited into other people's projects. And to increase the quality of the work, trust is important. In projects with tight deadlines, you have to trust that everyone involved do their part. And very often, people feel more committed when they have met in person. The participants also pointed out that to meet in a physical meeting first made it a lot easier to collaborate online afterwards. The explanation for that was that it was considered easier to get to know someone face-to-face than in a video call. And one of the reasons that came up for that was that when you're in a video call, you're often not 100% present. Sometimes people knock on your door, you have your other computer buzzing and other kind of distractions that makes it harder to really get to know people or to let people get to know you. But why go by plane? Many of the participants told me that they didn't really enjoy flying, but that reducing time away from home was of high importance. And the reason for this was to be able to maintain practices in other parts of their lives. They wanted to get back to their families, but they also wanted to spend their free time at home. And in addition, they have a busy schedule. So getting back to the office was of high importance. Because of Trondheim's location, going by train is very often not an option. It's too far away. And of course, air traffic offers a unique availability with several departures and many destinations. So the result is that air traffic has made it possible to travel longer and more often. And in some ways, going by plane enables the academics to do their job. So to sum it up, the mobile academic has been constructed through policies, strategies, and plans that have established mobility as an important part of the production of scientific knowledge. The importance of mobility has been enhanced by the way that academics conduct their job. And the air traffic has helped push the limits of what is considered normal amount of traveling. So the mobile academic has become a norm, and the result is the work travel culture that is dependent on flying. So when sustainability comes into the picture, it creates a dilemma. Because academics are dependent on flying, a reduction in air travels means a reduction in mobility. And that leads to a reduction in co-presence, which we saw was quite important to the production of scientific knowledge. This leaves academics in a dilemma. Should I do my job or should I be sustainable? What this study shows is that this dilemma has led to a work travel culture that is in a state of confusion. You're kind of damned if you do and damned if you don't. So the conclusion is that less mobility is contradicting to the way that the scientific knowledge production is seen. That is why ambitious goals and the encouragement of choose your travels wisely and do a video call instead is not enough to reach a substantial reduction in air travel. To succeed, the way that the production of scientific knowledge is seen must change. Mobility must stop being perceived as the best way of being international. And the main goal of the technology must not be on how it can imitate the physical meeting. Instead, we must focus on how technology can improve the production of scientific knowledge and internationalization. How can technology be used to establish trust, to build networks, and to get to know the people in your project? The answer might not be digital conferences and standard video calls, but something very different. So, back to the present and the impact of COVID-19. Why is this research important, even though no one is traveling anymore? Because one day, hopefully soon, our lives will go back to normal. And we will stop talking about red and yellow countries, and there won't be any restrictions on traveling. And the big question then is, has the changes in practice due to COVID-19 led to permanent changes in academics' work travel culture? This, of course, remains to be seen. But based on my study, this will ultimately depend on three factors. Has the way that we now see scientific knowledge production changed so that internationalization is no longer equal to mobility? Have the changes in practice led to a change in the norm of the mobile academic? And have the changes in practice led to a change in how academics use technology? These factors remind us that a temporary change in practice might not be enough to change a culture, but they are worth keeping in mind if we want to make a permanent transition to a more sustainable work travel culture in academia. And that was it. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Hanne Marit. So I wonder whether there are any questions to Hanne Marit from the audience. Well, I can only say that I'm proud that some of my former students have produced the numbers that that you have cited. It is for me the big question here with what might happen has to do whether there's any institutional change. Do you think that it's more important whether there's institutional change? You emphasized the role of NTNU's policies and the Research Council's policies, which of course sort of are an evidence for the pressure to travel. But do you think those institutional factors are more important, or it is more about personal habits and perspectives and experiences?
No, I think it is an institutional thing, but I also think that have the changes in practices that has happened over the past few months now, has it kind of been have it proved that it's actually that it's possible to be international without traveling so much? So I think the changes has to be come from top down, but I think this is a good chance to actually be able to prove that yes, it is possible. So yeah.
Right. Well, that is really good. So if I may read some of the questions here that have come in through the chat. Rebecca asks, are there any examples of universities that are moving away from having mobility as a goal?
Yeah, well, the thing is that there are a lot of universities that have a goal to reduce the air traffic, but it's all I haven't found anyone that is kind of going away from the goal of being mobile. It might be, but
Right.
it's very institutionalized in academia that you have to go and meet other people on conferences and physical meetings.
Mhm.
So, but I don't know if there are any universities that have removed it as a goal, let's say.
Yes, yes.
But that is one of the problems, that it is very contradicting, because the strategies and the goals of reduction in air travels are, it's contradicting. Yeah, so that's one of the issues.
I think we're all very conflicted about this.
Mhm.
Helge Brattebø, who is our director.
Okay, thanks, Hanne. Of course, we're talking about the leadership and the enablers, and then we're talking about the individual change, which is the culture. For how long time do you think you will have to follow, let's say, empirical evidence in order to be able to conclude on whether or not there are cultural changes in an organization like NTNU on this matter?
I think that's very hard to say, but I think that COVID-19 has offered us a pretty good opportunity to look into how a sudden change can affect practices on long term. So one of the things with this study is that it was conducted right before COVID-19 hit, so it's pretty fresh data on how things were. So it would be interesting to do a new study when things go back to normal, and do it pretty quickly, and then I don't know, maybe in half a year after, and see. And I think we would be able to see some changes within that time, if there are any. So, but I think it's
Well, excellent.
it's tough to predict how
Inspiration.
long it's going to take. Yeah.
Would you be available for such a follow-up study?
Yeah, I might be, actually.
Thanks.
All right, good. Here we are talking.